No, you're good.
You ready?
Yes.
Ready.
All right.
Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
and we're here with Chris Van Tassel. Welcome, Chris.
Hello.
How's your life going?
Well, I feel like a prisoner, but hey, it's cool.
Good place to be a prisoner in your soon-to-become world-class studio. You've got a bunch of gear that you're about to hook up. We've been on the phone quite a bit talking about patch bays and how to hook that up. Why don't you lean out of the way so they can see your API console?
Here, I'll turn on the light. Maybe that will help.
Oh, that looks nice.
That light looks good on in the back.
Can you see it at all?
Yeah, it looks great. Look at the console.
It's getting there. Of course, the Van Halen amp peeks out over the top.
As it should. You could. Why don't you leave that light on? It actually pushes you out a little bit from the background.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
There you go.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we were.
As long as you can see my ceiling fan, that's all that matters.
We were just saying before we went on air that every pedal manufacturer should have a world-class console and studio in his basement. So you do not disappoint.
Well, I must say, this is my plug. I have to thank all my friends in the biz. Josh Thomas, Mark Seaman, all the guys at Neve and API for hooking me up. That's, as you know, quite an expensive endeavor if you're not getting deals.
Well,
so they were nice enough.
For those of you who don't know, Chris Van Tassel is one of the principals and the chief creative designer at J Rockett Audio, mostly known as Rockett Pedals to the commoner. And Rockett Pedals kind of exploded onto the scene. They were making pedals for a long time, but then they kind of exploded into the forefront with their Klon copy, the Archer, which was the equivalent of a #1 song if you're in the pedal world. And Chris designed that pedal along with the original designer for the Klon, right?
Yeah, we actually started out trying to help Bill Finnegan get his KTR pedals into bigger production because the Klon pedals are hand wired, expensive builds, and he didn't have the slightest clue how to get it into mass production. So we had a facility out in San Diego, and we kind of put him through the paces, helped him work it so that it would be production friendly, and we built the first 1,500 of those for him.
And the Klon was something that you guys did as a partnership? Or
no,
the Archer?
No, it's kind of a...
And you know what? You could take off the kit gloves because I've heard that this guy is certifiably insane and almost impossible to work with. So,
well, you said it.
I had a friend who bought a Klon back in the day. And for those of you who don't know, the Klon is this really awesome mid-rangey pedal, like super mid-rangey, but like the most awesome guitar sound if you want that guitar sound, right? I don't know how better to describe it than that, but it's you could point to it on every record when it's on it because it's just such a cool sound. And he actually, my buddy had to call this dude and like audition, have an interview to get a pedal from him.
That's totally true, man.
But so you all ended up not staying in partnership together, right? I mean, you don't.
No.
If it's too uncomfortable, just tug on your ear at any point during this conversation.
Yeah.
But he's just sort of a malcontent. This guy is insanely. You can't really. People have a tough time staying in business with him, from what I understand. But he was the genesis of this pedal.
Yeah. He had a partner that was an MIT engineer that actually created this circuit, and Bill was an art major. So Bill designed the look of the enclosure, but he doesn't know anything about electronics. Like, you couldn't design a pedal. So he just learned how to build it, and his partner at some point in time passed away, and he kept building them. And it's interesting because I understand his struggles because we went through them to a degree. At the beginning, he did things that he thought were going to be unique, but when you start dealing with production, unique means more expensive. So he had things like sand casted enclosures that he had to create like $30,000 molds just to get that one that will eventually wear out. and it eventually did. And I don't think he really wanted to pony up another 30 grand to get another mold made. And that's when he started entertaining the idea of the KTRs and a mass production pedal. And what we, our influence on it all, or lack of influence, I should say, was that he did some things on there that we didn't agree with, because the Klon is so popular and such an iconic pedal. It's kind of like the Dumble of the pedal world. He strayed completely away from it. And he even said to me once, he goes, "I'm never going to build another Klon. That pedal has ruined my life." I'm like, okay, that's kind of crazy. But so we begged him to not do the design that he did, because it didn't pay any homage to the original Klon. And the Archer ultimately is what we wanted him to do. But, once we built everything out, built the first 1,500 for him, I think he was able to get a chunk of money in his pocket and took his production elsewhere where it was probably going to be cheaper. And we decided, well, we're stuck with about $150,000 worth of parts and pieces. What are we going to do with it? So we put it to work, created the Archer, and did what we thought he should do, and that is pay some homage to the original Klon, make it an affordable pedal, because the KTR is $100 more than the Archer is. And in the end, it just, I guess, I certainly won't take credit for anything other than riding his coattails on that one, but it was a necessary item for the market, because people weren't going to spend $2,500 on a Klon, yet everybody wanted that sound. So we gave them, what we feel is the closest thing on the market to that.
Well, and furthermore, it was
$99.
It was like all these dudes like Keith Urban and other dudes that have these pedals, they don't want to take them out on the road,
No.
So they ended up putting your box on their pedal board. So who's some of the noted guys that replaced their original Klon with your replica?
That I know of, only because they're either here or just through people I knew. I wish I could get a list of all the people that had Archers on their board that did replace their Klons, but I know that Keith Urban did. Of course, we did the one for Jeff Beck. He was a big proponent of the Klon, and I had a friend that was his guitar tech, still is, but he just asked me to send one out so he could check it out, and he loved it. And a little while later, I was messing around with some different parts and pieces, and I came up with a pedal that I thought sounded great. And I sent it to him to see if he liked it, and Jeff Beck loved it. So I ended up building him like 5 or 6 of those. And then we ended up coming out with basically the Jeff Beck mod to those pedals. And that one, it's kind of rare parts and pieces, but I wish I had a
production.
list. Yeah, we make it, but it's expensive, and we don't sell to dealers because we can't make that many of them because those parts are pretty limited. Mm-hmm. So we do sell it on the site, but it initially started out where I was just building it for like, notable players like Peter Frampton and Jeff Beck and Keith Urban. I don't know if Brad Paisley has one on his board, but I don't know. It's like one of those things that they're always very secretive about their boards, getting pictures of them and all that. But,
what's
the end
the
of the
sonic?
day,
What's the sonic difference on the Jeff Beck mod?
I think it's pretty subtle. But it just seems to be a little smoother all the way around. The controls interact differently with these parts and pieces. But if I were to compare it to anything, I think it sounds most like the very original Klon. Because whether he wants to tell you the truth or not about how Klon evolved over the years, there were experimentations with diodes, and that's kind of how we came up with the gold icon and the silver Archer, because we were matching the diodes that were used in different iterations of Klon along the way. He claims that he uses 1N34As, which I can tell you, if that's the case, then we're not doing an exact Klon because they don't sound very good. Those diodes speak there. It's interesting, I know. But, at the end of the day, it is what it is. He went his own way. I wish him nothing but success. Yes, I'll admit we kind of rode the coattails and got really lucky. But I think it was the fact that we did do a perfect recreation of a Klon in terms of sonics and the circuit. And I think that we proved that the market really wanted that.
And people respond to it, too. I mean, I've seen it written up a million places and people shooting it out against original versions of it.
Sure.
And I think out of all those pedals that are trying to be that, it's the one that has kind of broken the ceiling there and has been sort of anointed as the king of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I like the fact that it looks like a Klon. You know, we actually went as far as to make, you know, the Bakelite knobs, which I hate them because if you drop one, they'll just shatter into pieces. But, you know, we tried to be as, you know, conscious as we could be of, you know, the features of the Klon that made it interesting. And a lot of people in this business, it's crazy. They buy with their eyes. They don't care what things sound like half the time. They want it to look cool. And I thought that was a good idea to have the oxblood knobs and the silver and the gold. And, you know, it is out of respect to the Klon because it's such an influential piece of gear.
I'll tell you from an amateur electric guitar player, it's not a pedal that makes an amateur sound great.
Yeah.
You got to be like, it's kind of like a dude, when he picks up a Strat, you better be a pretty good player or a Telly, right? It's like if you see somebody with a Les Paul or with a 335, like me, humbucker pickups, it's like you're just sort of chunking through. And there's guys
all gained out.
Yeah, exactly. Those guys play and they're just fantastic. There's guys that play that guitar, you know, like everybody in the studio world. But you plug into a Klon and you better be a pretty good guitar player because it's not forgiving.
There's nowhere to hide.
It's not forgiving to a guy that's a songwriter trying to put a guitar down on something. I tell you what though, you sent me the Dude, which is your attempt at a Dumble, right?
Right.
And you have given me 3 of those. And I've given all 3 of them away. Not because I wanted to give them away, but because people, when they came to my place and they'd play it, they would be so in love with it. Mario from Godan Guitars was staying with me one weekend, and he got up the next morning. Him and his wife came down and were visiting and hanging out and seeing Nashville and hanging with us. And he played it the day before, and he got up the next morning and asked if he could go down to my studio to play it again. Like he just wanted to go down alone and play. And so I gave it to him, and I am now dudeless. But that pedal for me, man, that's one of the coolest pedals I've ever had. It might be my favorite pedal, and I don't even have it. It's just
I do have one for you here, but
it's such a great sounding pedal, you know. And there's another guy. It's like that dude is famous for being a weirdo too, right? It's like all these guys, and it's the same way with guys who mod microphones or great techs. It's like you pay them a bunch of money to do something, and then they keep your microphone for 2.5 years. As if like it takes 2.5 years to do it, and you're just sitting there waiting. There's a certain thing, I don't know if it's a psychological thing that they end up like thinking, hey, you know, passive aggressively, I'll just make these people wait or whatever it is. But that guy, you know, there's rumors of, you know, people ordering amps, like famous people ordering amps from Dumble and waiting years for them. Right?
Oh, there are guys that paid him and just never got an amp. Because have you ever read the Dumble rules? Like he would send out a pamphlet that said, these are the rules, and if you violate them, I have every right to just keep your money and tell you to go pound sand. It's pretty funny.
I'd love to see those rules.
Yeah, I think it's on his website, or at least it was. He's still making amps.
And what are these amps are like tens, like 30, 60 grand for these amps, right?
I think new, and this is just a guess from what I was told a while back, that the new ones are like 25 grand. But yeah, if you find the collectible ones, I've seen guys pay 250.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, it depends on how collectible they are. I have an interesting story about the Dude. You know, the guitar player for Alter Bridge, his name's Mark Tremonti.
Yeah. He's in Creed too.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool guy. He called me one day and he was like, hey man, I'm just checking out some pedals. Thought I'd give it a try. My wife bought me a Dude pedal for my birthday, and he goes, it's become my favorite pedal. And then we started talking, and he just kind of wanted to know the history behind the Dude. And, you know, our target was a Dumble, but, you know, all the Dumble fanatics know that no 2 Dumbles sound alike. You know, they have the same DNA generally, but they just don't sound alike because he always built them, you know, as a unique amp every time. And so instead of trying to recreate a Dumble, which is impossible to do unless you're specifically recreating a certain serial number, but who's going to have any reference, right? So we decided to go after a tone that we liked, and we ended up designing the Dude and the Boing reverb based on the Robin Ford Talk to Your Daughter sound. And, you know, it's as close as you can get with a pedal, I think. It's got that feel. It's got that thing that I think that makes Dumbles magic because of their feel. But anyway, probably a year later, I'd never told that story to anybody. I got a call from a guy named Simon Law. He was Robin Ford's tech in Europe. And he said, hey, man, I wanted to see if you could send us out another dude and another Boing. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I had no idea that you had, even had him in the first place. So the crazy part is that story was never out there, but Robin Ford somehow found his way to the two pedals that were designed after his tone on one record.
That's amazing.
That's what is that like, having all these guys? I can remember a time, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but where you were trying to get people to put your pedals on their pedal board. But what is it now? Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to finish the story about Mark Tremonti, is I told him that whole story, and he's like, wow, so what Dumble did you use in the beginning? And I said, well, we used Keith Urban's Dumble that Mike Britt had for a period of time, and he was using it to create his Kemper profiles with it. So that was his Dumble reference. And so I'm like, hey, can I borrow that? So I borrowed it, and we kind of just played with it until we got what we thought was the DNA of that amp. Well, ironically, Mark Tremonti ended up buying that amp from Keith Urban. And he freaked out in that he had the amp that the pedal was designed after. Like, he was more excited about having the dude than he was the Dumble. It was pretty funny. That's so yeah, the story behind the dude's pretty interesting, because I don't know, what you think is going to be a hit always surprises you, and what you don't think is going to be a hit always surprises you. And
would you say
didn't know what would happen there?
That the dude is a hit?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think it's become our second best seller
behind the Archer.
Look at the numbers. Yeah. The two Archers, they always do well, but the dude has become a pretty big hit. And that's, the HRM pedal that we came out with was basically the HRM EQ mod that Dumble did to an Overdrive Special. So it's just a different iteration of the dude with a little bit different EQ, and it's really good too. But it just hasn't hit like the dude has. And I don't know if it's marketing, I don't know if it's word of mouth, I don't know what it is, but it's a great pedal. But like
it's
I said,
funny
you
because
never know. It's
like a hit song. It's like it's a hit because you think it's a hit and you've listened to it. But sometimes there's instances. I was telling Mike the other day, there's a Jerry Rafferty song that I never knew that my wife loves, right down the line, and they didn't play it in Pittsburgh, so it wasn't a hit. But like, I love this dude pedal, but I was totally unaware whether or not it was selling well. It's like, it's so interesting. Pedals are as specific to the player sometimes in what they like and what they enjoy as a song would be, and so something could be a hit for me and maybe not for someone else.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think? Sure. Going back to my question, what is it like to have, now you guys are at the point where it's like your pedals are on all these noted guitar players, these tastemakers, all these guys that people look to for and are inspired by and say, I want that tone. What does it feel like now to have your pedals on those pedal boards rather than back 5-6 years ago, whenever you guys were struggling to break in and make a name for yourselves?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, I must admit. I mean, I grew up a huge Jeff Beck fan, and to know that the Archer was what he was using on his last record, and you can listen to the recordings and go, wow, that was something that we created, that he made music with. It's pretty surreal. Just, starstruck, I guess. But it's pretty cool to know that, people are inspired to a degree with our products to create music with it. And that's really what we, set out for.
Well, you see that, like, so the 355, the Gibson 355 was sort of the cream of the crop, right? Gold appointments, everything was sort of the top of the line, and B.B. King played it, of course. But you see people going after the 335s, which are, that was the economy version. But they did it because Eric Clapton played it, right? Yeah. They did it because their heroes played it. So as a kid coming up, you're like, oh, I want that sound, and I want to be like Eddie Van Halen, or I want to be like Eric Clapton, or I want to be like, these folks that you just admire them. And you go out and buy their gear. Why wouldn't you? Right? It's like, that's how you get that sound. And then you just got to hunker down and do your 10,000 hours. Hopefully you can achieve it. But it's interesting the way things take over. You would never think the 335, by the way, which cost $335 when it was released.
Right.
That's why,
Not quite the same today.
Right. Some of these guitars are going for $100,000 plus, depending on if they have some provenance of who played them. But, you can go out and just get a 59 335, and you're going to be in that, if depending on the color. If it's a blonde, you're going to be up near $100,000 for that guitar if nobody played it. So it just goes to show, you know, it's a lot of this is influence. It's like what people take away. They see something, they hear something, they get inspired by a person, and they then want to know what they're playing. It must be cool for y'all to be a part of that now, because people 10 years from now will be buying that because Jeff Beck played it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can't pay for that kind of promotion.
Right. It is pretty surreal. You know, I guess I don't consider myself the type of person that gets starstruck, but when you see the stuff that you've created ending up on records or on players' boards, it is pretty cool. Awesome. But ironically, you know, to your point, most players don't want to buy stuff that has like, it's an Eddie Van Halen pedal and it's got all the black, white, and red stripes on it. People don't want to be seen as though they're, you know, a fanboy and they're out playing all Van Halen stuff. Like we've built a Holdsworth pedal and different pedals like that. And I can't tell you how many pro players would put a piece of tape over his name or something stupid like that, right? Because they just didn't want that name on there. Yet people try to cop all those famous guitar players' sounds. They just don't want to quite look like a fanboy, which is interesting.
Let's talk about your fanboyism of Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
You're one of the sickest Eddie Van Halen followers I've met. You had a birthday party at my barn where a ton of alcohol was consumed. And there's video of me playing the drums. I don't play the drums, but there's video of me playing the drums in the band with you playing guitar, and Ford Thurston was there, and it was Melee. And someone sent me this video of me playing the drums on Back in Black, and I was like, I don't even remember that part of the night. But one thing was in common the whole night, which was your love for Eddie Van Halen. And to a flaw, I mean, you've got your collection of Eddie Van Halen sort of amplification and guitars and your style and knowing every song. Is there any chance that Eddie Van Halen would ever play any of the Chris Van Tassel products?
I would have to say probably not. I mean, he's one of those guys that, you never know. But he's one of those guys. He's got a deep relationship with Dunlop and the MXR guys and, you know, George Trips. And they're all great guys, and they know how to do it right. But he's a brand, you know. And I know they're very, I don't want to call them litigious, but very aggressive when their brand is being violated. So, you know, like in example, that amp, let me see if you can see it. You see it in the background, the red and white stripes. So that was made by a guy named Bob Smith, RJS Amps. And if you go to his website, you'll hear, you know, he's a huge Van Halen fan. And I contacted him because I just wanted something just absolutely spot on. So he's got like, you know, basically 67.5 plexi with lay down transformers, mustard caps, 6 CA7 tubes, exactly like Eddie's amp. But that will never last. He'll get shut down if he hasn't been shut down already. So you'll see people painting stripes or doing this and that. And so for him to come to a small company like us and say, hey, I like that pedal, or can you do something for me? Probably highly unlikely, because there's so much legal mumbo jumbo tied up in his world of branding.
Let's talk for a second about his tone. I was a huge fan of early Van Halen. Mm-hmm. I loved it whenever he'd go to the solo and the guitars would drop out and it'd just be bass and drums and him soloing. And, you know, a lot of those records, to my recollection, was one guitar too. It wasn't like stacked guitars. It was like one massive sounding guitar. Yeah. And then you go into 5150, which they were great songs. And that, you know, was a great era with Sammy Hagar and Undeniable Hits. And maybe from a record selling standpoint, probably much bigger than the original Van Halen. Who knows? But that tone, I just couldn't get behind it. What's your thoughts on that era of Eddie Van Halen guitar tone?
No, I agree totally. But you know, if you really listen to 5150, you can still hear the classic Van Halen guitar tones, but then he'll do songs that have that crazy, like Eventide H3000 chorus all over it. Yeah. And I know that he evolved into doing direct stuff. And I think I told you years ago, I you know, knew Andy Johns, and he produced that for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge record. And that was supposedly the album that his Marshall blew up on. And he couldn't find an amp that he liked. I think he ended up finishing the album with like a Soldano or something like that. But you can really hear in 5150 the classic Van Halen tones, and then after that, you can kind of hear that either his amp was kind of crapping out on him, or he was using different amps at that point in time. But yeah, it never sounded the same. It sounded all.
And how do you go from
some of
that
those sounded
tone?
terrible.
How do you go from that monster, like it is, if you had one guitar tone for the rest of your life, it could be those early Van Halen records. How do you go from that to that chorusy ADA rack-mounted guitar tone? How do you do that?
Probably because he was going deaf, because he cranked those 100-watt Marshalls, you know?
Well, it's weird because all the tones got darker. You know, they got more mid-rangey rather than a person going deaf usually cranks the high end, right? It didn't get brighter. It sort of got more chorusy. It got sort of smaller, like Rockmanish. It was just anemic.
Yeah, from what I was told, he did literally go to recording direct, I think, with some of those old Palmer boxes. And I just think it's like, you know, when you're in the business that long and you're writing songs, as many songs as they did, and touring and doing drugs and all that stuff, you probably get to the point where you just want to get it done, you know, and you probably
or any change is good change.
Yeah,
you know?
True.
Yeah, I just wish we could have an intervention with him, you know, like sit him down, all of his friends, you know, and tell him we love him, you know, but we can't go forward with him. We can't be, what do they call that? Whatever. We can't be a part of we can't be enablers for him. He has to go back to the original guitar tone. And they got to put Michael Anthony back in the band. I mean, what is that about?
Oh, it's lame. You know, and it's funny you say that. I've been listening to a lot of the original ZZ Top stuff, like first album stuff lately. And I never realized how influenced Van Halen was by ZZ Top. But it's not the guitar playing or the songwriting, but it's the way the backing vocals are implemented. If you ever listen to, like, you know, Brown Sugar, all that original ZZ Top stuff, you'll hear the backing vocals. You swear it's Michael Anthony singing.
Wow.
I think he is a massive influence on the Van Halen sound, and he gets no credit for it.
Massive. And, you know, he's the kind of guy, the quintessential bass player, right? The personality is like, this is the DNA of all bass players.
Right.
I don't know one single insider piece about that, but I know that he's not wrong. I know that they're wrong and he's right. He's just like one of those guys that, you know, you have these certain friends, like Mike Shimshack is one of these guys. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, man, I had it out with Mike, had a huge fight, he's a total dick, I'd be like, no way, you're wrong. It's just like Michael Anthony has that DNA, which is there's no way he was the wrong guy. He was the wronged party in that. And what are they doing? They're ruining it for everybody who was a fan of that. You want to go, it's a trio. It's a power trio. And it's like, you want to go see that. Why take those guys off the stage like they did with dude from who wrote Hotel California, guitar player.
Henley?
No.
Oh, Don Felder.
Don Felder. It's like, get it together, guys. You're making tens, if not hundreds of millions. People want to see Don Felder play guitar, right? I mean, they want to see that as part of it. It's just, it's a drag for the consumer, but it's just the way of all creative process eventually devolves into like what our society is devolving into today. How long can you expect for America as an idea to continue on without slowly getting eaten apart, you know? And it's the same way in every band. When we see it in the music business, we all just sort of don't mention it because we've all had our music business, you know, all the wrongs done to us. We see how the creative process always devolves, not to the best version of itself. But it's just, you hate to see it with a band that you love that was a part of your DNA. You know, it's like that Van Halen. Yeah. Van Halen and both incarnations were really cool. But from a sonic standpoint, and I don't even know what's going on with the drums on OU 812. I don't even know if those are drums. They sound like buckets, like the guys who play buckets in Times Square. Like, I don't know what that is, you know, but it's like, to me, it's just like, I have to listen through the sounds to like the music, which is like the worst case scenario for me on any band that I follow. Yeah,
and I have to admit, I gained more respect for Michael Anthony in the way that he's handled it all. He never, ever says a bad thing. He just kind of says, oh, it is what it is. You know, and people try to drag him into that. Like, have you ever seen that, what was it called? That Metal Show?
Yeah.
It used to be on, I don't know. I don't even know what channel. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. MTV. Wasn't it MTV?
Yeah, Eddie Trunk.
Yep,
yes.
Eddie Trunk. Yep.
Yeah. So Sammy Hagar was on there, and he was talking about chicken foot. And I think Joe Satriani was with him, and what's his first name? Skolnick. Alex Skolnick.
Yeah.
they always had a guitar player up in the audience, right? Just playing in between interviews. And they really tried to get on that whole Van Halen thing. And Michael Anthony was there, and they asked him this question: who's a better guitar player, Joe Satriani or Eddie Van Halen, right? And so Sammy, of course, oh, Joe, he's way better. And he just started throwing Eddie under the bus, and he had to write all this stuff, and he had to practice it before he recorded it. And I'm just like, well, that's what everybody does. But then they pan up to Alex Skolnick, and he's up in the crowd with his arms like folded, and he's just going like this.
That's amazing.
And it's like, yeah, that was huge. And it's like, really? I mean, I have stories about Sammy Hagar because a friend of mine was David Lee Roth's guitar player for years, and he did that tour when it was Dave and Sammy. Do you remember that years ago?
Yeah.
And let's just say you're not, you don't know the behind the scenes there. And I think Eddie and Alex get thrown under the bus a lot. And believe me, I'm sure they've had their influence. But that's the one thing I've respected about Michael Anthony is he's always just been like, he doesn't say anything really, just stays.
Did you ever see the YouTube video that's going around of Dave with his giant dressing room and they gave Sammy like the little shitty dressing room? You ever seen that video that's going? It was on that tour. Like yeah. Dave had like all the amazing things that come with being a rock star, and they were giving Sammy like the tiny little dressing room. He was pissed.
Well, and they used to, and I don't know if that like alternated. That may be what got out on video, but I know that they were alternating headlining. Every show, one would switch. And I know that Sammy tortured Dave, a ton, was really rude to him. And the people that I knew that were on that tour were not a fan of Sammy Hagar, and they loved Dave. And Dave's crazy, man.
That's
so
surprising.
Brian, when my friend Brian got the gig, right, he calls me, he's like, this is like, because he's a huge Van Halen fan, because he was the guitar player for that band, the Atomic Punks.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they noticed him. And he got the gig when Dave took over the radio show for Howard Stern. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah, it was like a year or two. So Brian got flown out, and he was like the background guitar player, on the radio show. He was telling me, he goes, man, first night, he goes, I have no idea what to expect. Dave's like, all right, everybody, we're heading down to the airport. So he takes them all to the airport. They all get out. They hop in a helicopter. Dave jumps in the pilot's seat. And they're like, what the hell's going on here, eh? So they take off. And he's like, this is the most surreal thing I've ever experienced in my life. I'm flying around Manhattan in between the buildings, and David Lee Roth is my pilot, right?
Right.
And he was telling me that Dave had like this really expensive apartment in whatever the expensive part of town in New York City is, uptown or whatever, I don't know. And then he had a really shitty apartment in the worst part of town. And at the time, he was a working EMT in New York City. And he'd never stayed in the expensive apartment. He stayed in the shitty apartment on the roof in a tent in the middle of winter. Like, he was crazy like that. He would take trips to the Amazon by himself and canoe. He just a total adventurous guy. So Brian, after years with him, he's literally the most impressive human being I've ever been around. He speaks like 7 different languages. He's multiple black belts. He does everything. And one of the interesting stories was he grew up in Pasadena, and he went to a private school. And to get into the private school, you had to test. So he took the test, and he scored the absolute lowest grades in the history of the school in math, and the highest grades in the history of school in English language.
Wow,
that's funny.
Yeah, so it kind of tells you, right? Certain people are meant.
Well, it's interesting too, because David Lee Roth kind of comes off as the asshole in the like the internet stories. Whenever you see, like when they interview Sammy Hagar, and Sammy Hagar with his Cabo Wabo probably could buy Van Halen 6 times over, right? So he's by far the richest, probably, if not, arguably the richest in that band. But it's like he comes off as though he's the amiable one, the sane one. And of course, David's not sane, but I think that's why people love him. And
he's literally bipolar. And I wouldn't know this had I not gotten all these direct stories from Brian, but he never said anything bad about him. He was always just glowing reviews about who he was as a person. And, as guys know, experiencing the world in Nashville, it sucks to be a sideman in a band here, because they don't keep you on retainer. they always have some young hot shot that can come do it for $10 an hour, you know? So your position is volatile at best. And Dave kept Brian on retainer for 5 years at like $15,000 a month, whether they played or not.
Oh,
and
wow.
he always made it a point to tell his band that he will always treat his band better than anybody. And that's pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So what is your thoughts on, I've been listening to any of the live David Lee Roth stuff. He did a Vegas show.
Yeah. You mean the live show tunes?
I have no idea what that guy is like. The melodies aren't even reminiscent.
No,
it's not like
it sounds like show tunes.
It's insanely bad, and it's not even. There's no honor to the melodies, and then they're all just like random pitches. I mean, it's some of the most disturbing things I've ever heard. When you think of like, he had that beautiful like high pitched sort of squeal where he would go up and like almost be at a whistle, right? In that early Van Halen stuff. And it was just like, showed like this guy has got complete control of his instrument, right? And then it's like, now, I don't know what's going on. It's a complete another. If I paid $200 to go there and see that, I'd walk out.
I swear, the smartest move Van Halen could make would be to hire Ralph from Steel Panther to be their singer. Because he does the Van Halen thing so well, and he brings that energy back.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Sammy, Dave, but, well, Gary Sharon, really, right?
And there was that other guy. Who was the other guy that never got released? I actually
wasn't that guy Mitch Malloy or something?
Yeah, Mitch Malloy.
Way
they
back.
did a record with him that never got out.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who had done a record for Mitch Malloy in New York City, and then I met Mitch Malloy at the BMI Awards one year, and then I watched that whole documentary about Mitch Malloy, the unknown singer of Van Halen.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that call. You get a call to be the lead singer of Van Halen. You go and you make the record, and then it just is like never existed.
Yeah.
Talk about like feeling like, wait a minute, what just happened to my entire life? I mean, you're the lead singer. Imagine that, Mitch was probably doing his thing, whatever, just like all of us are. And then he's catapulted into this superstardom world. And then it's just like never happened.
Yeah, that would be depressing, to say the least.
That would do damage to your emotions for sure.
Oh, I mean, you've already it's like you've won the lottery. They gave you the giant check, right? And then it's just the money never got into your account. So it's like, talk about the near miss that will literally derail your creative career. I don't know what Mitch Malloy is doing now, but man, I hope that he's still doing it, but you would not blame him for being like an insurance salesman at this point. Imagine those conversations.
How many bands out there that had to go through a lead singer change either remained popular or got more popular? There's not that many. And Van Halen actually did that with Sammy. They sold more records with 5150 than any other album. So you can't say it wasn't a smart move.
AC/DC is the only other one I could think of.
Yeah. And Journey's doing really well now with Dude. But not like they're doing new records. And if they are, I haven't heard any of them.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. Like, you can change out a drummer and nobody's going to know, right? You can change out anybody but a lead singer. It's pretty impressive that Van Halen was able to basically create two mega different bands, Same band members for the most part, but it was different music, but they were successful in both eras. I prefer early Van Halen, but I don't dislike the Sammy Hagar stuff. It's funny because we have two Newfoundlands. Their names are Eddie and Dave, as you know. But Dave, he's a bit not smart, our Dave. And he's so long that you'll see his front end do things and then his back end's kind of doing something different. So we've named his ass Sammy and Dave.
I can remember I brought my puppy, my little German Shepherd puppy, who's laying behind me here as a full-formed German Shepherd. I brought her over, and she was like manic, like crazy dog. And I brought her over to your house, and your dogs were in the front yard, and my dog looked out the window and was about to jump out all excited, and she saw your dogs, and she's like, no way. I couldn't get her out of the car. These things are like, they were like Chewbacca's walking around the front of his front yard of his house, and my dog was just like, I am not going out there.
Yeah, they have that effect. Even though they're the nicest animals, but just getting drooled on by
That's
them.
it. I had dog drool, like Turner and Hooch drool in my dog for like a week after that. All this crusty fur all over.
Oh, it's brutal. I call it the what's the movie?
Turner
Something about Mary moment, right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Hey, okay, so I know that's a departure totally like left field, but I know how big of I mean, that's just fun to talk about, that whole Van Halen story. But I want to also ask you, you're in the middle of doing something new. You're doing a social platform. You know, we have all these social platforms we go to for certain things. Go to Reverb for this, go to eBay for that, go to Facebook for this, go to Instagram for that. But you've got this idea, and it's well formed at this point. It's in a beta testing format, and you're about to release a new social platform that is I guess it's a creative platform. Yes, it's for creatives, but it's sort of
it is
encompasses all the things we go to separate places for. Tell us a little bit about the idea behind it and what it's going to look like.
Yeah, it is. You know, and you look at Reverb. Reverb was basically, hey, why do we need all this nonsense in eBay? Let's just create an eBay for musicians, right? It's very focused on just that industry, and it proved to be exactly what the industry wanted, right? But they were missing a lot of things. And my point of view was, as a manufacturer, we really have no outlets for marketing. We've got guitar magazines and social media. We can't market on radio or TV. For one, it's cost prohibitive. I can't speak. And we don't have an audience that really, you know, pays attention there. And after spending thousands of dollars on magazine ads and all that stuff, we're just like, man, we can continue to do this, and it's almost like we're just leaking money to do it, and we never saw real results. We just wanted to come up with a better place for the music industry to market their stuff, because when you try to market through Facebook, they hit you with all sorts of algorithm chokes, and just when you think you figured it out, they change them, and they don't want you to succeed with your ads. And if you do, they want to be able to say, oh, if you want to reach more people, you're going to have to pay more money. And it got to the point where it was costing you more money than what you were bringing in. So we're trying to address a lot of the things that are very conscious of musicians, the limitations that they have, and we're trying to give them a place to brand themselves, a place for them to buy, sell, trade, a place for them to socialize. We're even going so far as to adding a GPO, so that it'll be a giant group policy so that musicians can sign up for affordable health insurance. We're going to have people on board that are financial advisors to say, hey, you just made $250 at your gig. Why don't you take $10 and put it here? You know, just things like that, because the music industry, as you well know, has always been a dog eat dog kind of a thing. And there's no support. There's no education whatsoever. And that's one of the things that, you know, you're going to be great to have on, is to tell people how to navigate the waters of licensing and publishing and all that stuff, because people just don't know. Sorry, I just got a notice. You can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, something just popped up.
The president?
I didn't know if my headphones were crapping out on me. Well, anyway, so it's just basically going to be a place, we call it a happy fun house for musicians. Like, everything that you need to accomplish as a musician will be under one roof. So we're taking guys like, I use Sean Tubbs as a great example. You know, he was Carrie Underwood's guitar player for 14 years, and nobody knew who Sean Tubbs was, right? He was Carrie Underwood's guitar player. And I finally convinced him to start doing demo videos for us. And he does a great job, but he gets paid $750,000, whatever it might be, per product. And then he's done. And you know how much work it takes to create a video like that, especially what he does. He's writing the music, recording the music, recording all the different editing. Yeah. And at the end of the day, $750, it's not worth your time doing that. So we're creating a space, and I don't want to give away too much, but we're creating a way for these guys to actually generate more income from the videos that they do. Like I said, it's a place for them to brand each other. We've got, you know, all of the hotshot musicians involved, whether they're producers, engineers, guitar players, bass players. And it'll be a place for people to connect. And I was speaking to a very well-known producer the other day about coming on board. And he said, you know, the funny part is, he goes, I do these podcasts, I do these interviews, I do all this stuff, and I do it for free all the time, and I'm happy to do it. And he said, but the one thing that I've realized is that people look at me as though I'm untouchable. Like, because I've done famous records, I would never consider doing an album for you, being an unfamous musician. But he said, I've discovered many bands that were just friends of mine or somebody I just saw at a club, and that's how I got the gig. And he said, I'll work with anybody, money's money at that point in time. But he said, I'm available, but people don't know that. So he's really excited that this will be a platform for connection like that, And you being a producer, you could probably appreciate the fact that, hey, I didn't realize I could use Joe West to produce my record.
What I love about it is that the mission statement for why it's founded is like a utopian society, right? It's good intent. Right. It's not like Facebook. It's like, how can we get this person to build a giant audience and then choke them away from the audience and sell their audience back to them for every click? Or even when they give you an impression, it's like somebody zoomed by your ad at 100 miles an hour. Now that counts as an impression. I don't trust their motives, and I spend very little money on Facebook doing anything, but I love the idea and the mission statement behind it. And I also think it's like, rather, you said dog eat dog, it's like a dog feed dog world. It's like people genuinely who have been successful at this, and that's what this podcast is, what I'm hoping it sort of is known for, is that you get to peek behind the curtain with people that have accomplished things and see what the real deal is, the real world. And a lot of people that have done that want to do that. They want to share their experience with people. They don't want to hoard it and make it like, hey, I got mine, you need to get yours. They really do want to have this, hey, I'll show you because you're a human being and you're going to do it different than me. And you're going to have, it's not going to be my thing that's out there that I am losing from. It's just going to, we can grow the space, grow the economy rather than steal market share from one another. And I love that. I love everything that you've told me about it. I'm really excited to see, how it goes. The reality, though, is the basis for it is who knows where it will evolve to, because, maybe you'll become incredibly corrupted by the financial aspect of it. I hope not. I don't think so. I know you. But the idea that there's a safe place to go where that there's no pretext, people legitimately, there's good information, good resources. You could buy your gear. You could take lessons from someone. You could talk to someone you never thought you could talk to. You can get involved with getting people hired. You could get a health plan for yourself, get some financial advice. I mean, the idea of it feels much like the reason why people push wooden ships off of Europe and headed towards the United States. Some place where they could actually get value and actually get tutoring and then be able to exploit whatever it is they've been able to build.
Yeah, and for some reason, the music industry has remained a world that it's not, it is community-based, but when it comes to the money aspect of it all, it is not at all. People are out for their own. And I think that if we turn it into more of a community-based thing, it's going to start bringing creative music back, because I think we're losing so many musicians and potential great music because people are like, I'm not going into the music business because it's impossible to make a living.
Yeah.
And
Mark Cuban said that specifically.
Yeah, it is. Because as you know, music has no value whatsoever. You see bands that had mega #1 hits that can't even give away a CD or a download or whatever. It's the methodology in which music is delivered these days that has completely choked out the ability to make a living. And I just can't believe that the music industry hasn't embraced what like the video industry has embraced. The piracy, the encrypting, all those kinds of things that they fight against. They actually put out effort in the world of video, but in music, it sucks because we're going to be boiled down to all this formulaic music pretty soon. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but Nashville is pretty well known for coming out with music that is, 20 seconds to the hook, and it's all the same formula. It all sounds the same. It's the same song rewritten 1,000 times. There's no creativity. Like you go back and listen to Queen or Pink Floyd or any of the, old school stuff where these guys were given the freedom to explore. Who cares if they're not on the click track? Who cares if their, notes are a little bit off? That's what made it human, and that's what made it appealing. And that's all going away because there is no community anymore where you don't go grab an album and study that as a kid anymore, right? Everything's so easily accessible as a musician. You can learn to be an amazing guitar player in 16 seconds because you've got access to everything on YouTube. But what it's done is it's created a world of imitators, and the originality of guitar playing or any instrument or music in itself is just been depleted completely. And I'm just hoping that this creates a place that people can say, I can be myself, I can create my own music, I can sell my own music, and not have to kowtow to the formulaic BS that the record company shoved down your throat. I mean, I know, years ago, a 360 deal was absolutely the worst thing you could ever sign with a record company. And now it's the only deal, you know?
360 meaning that they get a part. There's 4 streams of revenue in the music business. There's record royalties, there's publishing, there's touring, there's merchandise. So once the record business went into the toilet, the record company said, hey, we're going to now participate in all of those streams of revenue. So when they sign you, they'll end up getting a part and going into business with you and your T-shirt sales and whatnot. And the other tricky thing that the music executives did was they gave up the battle on intellectual property because they were the owners of those masters, right? So they had a big stake in that. And they just went to the other side, which was streaming and what was, LimeWire and Napster. They went to the modern incarnations of those, which are Spotify and Apple Play or Google Play and Apple iTunes. And they said, hey, let's go into business with you. How many places do you know of that go into business with the other side? Whenever they've got all this, they're literally leveraged all of their catalog, which was the artists, where the artists had intellectual property. They then leveraged that to these streaming services, got benefit and ownership out of it, and didn't share any of that, even though they used all the intellectual property to do it with the artists. So essentially, they just slammed the back door on the artists and left us all out here in this field, and they got into the house with this new emerging technology, right? And now it's like their profits make sense because they've joined the other team.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we... They could have never done that without leveraging all the intellectual property that all the artists gave to them. And they did it and left everybody out in the cold. So that explains why we're in the position we're in. But we've got to find a way to monetize the creative efforts. And the other problem that nobody talks about is that 1% of the music business, it's like society, 1% makes all the money. Me and Mike were talking about this. I had years where I was having hits where one quarter I had a check that was more than my father made for 10 years in the steel mill.
Yeah.
And then everybody under that makes no money. And then all these people up here make all the money. What must it be like to be on stage with the Eagles or my buddy who plays with Journey, Travis Thibodeau, tours and sings and plays keyboards with Journey, making his $300 a night, $500 a night, whatever he's making, $1,000 a night, and everybody else on stage are multi-millionaires.
Yeah.
The guy behind Jason Aldean is not even, maybe they are locked down with they probably have a retainer, but these guys essentially are making 60, 70 grand a year to stand behind a guy who's making a $700,000 guarantee for the night without merch. What is that all about?
And I do think it comes down a little bit to the artists themselves. If you're a sideman for an artist, as you know, I get guitar players over here constantly demoing pedals. So I'll get, famous people's guitar players, so to speak. And I was talking with a guy that was Garth Brooks' guitar player that came over. And he was telling me that he had been with Garth for, 14 years, something long for a sideman. And he said at the end of the year, Garth wrote him a check for like 350 grand. It's just a bonus, right?
Wow.
You've got artists that can afford it.
Amazing.
And they do good with it. And then you've got artists that can afford it and they keep it all for themselves. And you're just a peon as a sideman. And maybe there should be regulation on something like that. Maybe there should be some sort of an official musicians union that enforces that kind of a thing. But I think that anymore, the best enforcer is social media. And you look at Mike Fuller, Full Tone Pedals. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He went out and made a statement the other day, and going against, what's going on TV. Just expressed his opinion, and he's being dropped now by Reverb, by Guitar Center, all because social media decided to take it and run with it. Yeah. Well, social media can take something like this and run with it and make demands, I think. And in an essence, that's what we're trying to create is one large community.
I'm not against it either, because even as I say it, I'm so conflicted because it's like, well, crap, Keith Urban is why people come to the arena. Doesn't matter who plays with them. So like, I see both sides. It's like, just because you make $1 million, should you have to split that equitably? No, but I think Garth Brooks does the right thing. You just hope that people will do the right thing. I don't want to compel them to do it, but you hope that there's a good nature. Jimmy Wayne just called out Luke Bryan online because Luke Bryan had posted this post about, hey, who was it? Something support the songwriters. What was that, Mike?
Yeah, it was something to that effect of like the song, no, it was trying to get songwriters, I believe, to raise money, right, for a cause.
Oh,
wasn't that it?
I think
something to that effect.
It's at least a week old, so it's completely erased from my memory. But it was this thing where the Jimmy came on, and Jimmy does not. He gives zero shits about anything like that. He's not like compelled by Music Row. He's like, why don't you give some money? You're the guy making, $50 million a year. It's like, why are you going to compel these songwriters who's like, they don't make any money? It's like calling out the hypocrisy of it. I think that's what we need. We need people like Jimmy Wayne. We need people that see it for what it is, and they aren't afraid to say it because they're afraid of losing some gig or having some stigma on Music Row where someone said that's the guy that went against the, we need to get rid of that. And we need to find a way. I think everybody needs to have accountability. One thing I've learned or have been sort of reinforced in my character during all these crises in 2020 is that nobody is going to take care of me.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. Build your brand. Find a way to be compelling. Find a way to have something to sell that is you, that isn't just, hey, I play guitar and I'm just like, I'm an amazing guitar player and I can go out on the road with somebody. You've got to combine that with something that you're doing in your off time that's raising your own brand, taking care of yourself, something that someone can't take away from you or replace you. Yeah. That's the ticket, I think. That's my walk away.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it requires a platform, because you can say all you want. You can be altruistic in every way, but if you don't have a platform for those words to be heard, might as well not say it at all, right?
But you've got to find it, right? You've got to, like this podcast we're trying to grow. We know we don't advertise a podcast. We don't do anything. All we do is we get up and we do it, but it's compelling. Yep. We've had a lot of compelling conversations today with you, not about pedals, right? And it's like, it's we want it to be great on its own account. But right now the numbers they're horrible. We have horrible numbers. That does not deter me. It doesn't deter Mike. We do it because we love this.
Fun.
What we're doing. And I'm confident because I've done it enough time in different industries, in different iterations of myself. I'm confident that if you do good work, it will eventually get recognized. And these videos that we shoot, they'll go up. They'll get whatever hits they get for the next couple of weeks, what we perceive to be the life of them. And then they'll eventually get thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of views once we aggregate an audience. But it's like you've got to do whatever you can do wherever you can do it, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. You've got to at least put in the work and believe in the work that you do. We believe in it. And even if it doesn't ever get that, it's worth it because we're having a good time doing it. We enjoy it.
Yeah. It's all easy compared to the music business.
Well, and it's funny because, technology has afforded us the opportunity to do things like this. Imagine trying to do this 30 years ago. Impossible.
Right. Yeah.
And trying to embrace all the new technologies is really what we're talking about here with this website that we're creating, just making it easy. Use a guy as an example, like Pete Thorne. He's kind of the guy that started the whole video review on YouTube. And he does a great job. He's a super nice guy. He's everything you'd want as somebody representing your product. Obviously, he's a great guitar player. But I don't think he set out to go become a millionaire making YouTube videos. I think he did it because he loved it. He loves gear. And he got to the point where he was the only game in town for a little while, and his audience just exploded. But it always remains that he's doing this because he loves gear. He loves playing. You can just tell that in his videos, his love for everything he does goes into these videos. But is he an SEO guy? Does he know how to take his stuff and make it go out there and score great numbers on YouTube and Google and all that? No. And wouldn't it be great if there was a company out there that actually did that didn't scam you out of money and say, oh, we're going to go buy likes for you, or we're going to, tweak your SEO. if there's a place where everybody, like Sean Tubbs, Pete Thorne, because somebody comes to this page and all these guys are under one roof, they're just going to sit there and go through all of them because it's so much more convenient. You know, they're going to spend the time and like I said, a happy little fun house for
I'm
musicians,
excited about
no matter what you play.
The goal, I mean, it's like with anything, you imagine what it could be and you hope that the realization of it gets there. But I love it for what it is. I think it's
you get to be a beta tester, so.
Awesome. I don't know what that means, but I'm in.
That means you're going to go in before it's ready to be released and go, this sucks, and this sucks. That's the whole point of it, right? But we want it to be right. And, you know, there are things I can't really talk about, but it's going to give people a place to perform. It's going to be a place for everything that you can think of. And, you know, guys like what you do, you know, you're behind the scenes, but this can bring you to the front of everything. Your experience, your knowledge, everything that you have to offer the general public in terms of musicians, it's valuable information.
Yeah,
it really is, because, man, there are no real books written on how to navigate the waters of the Nashville music scene or the LA music scene or the music business in general. There's nothing out there.
Yeah.
And it may exist, but who knows where to find it. And like when I first moved to Nashville, I was like, okay, who am I going to get to work on my guitar? Well, there's no advertising. Nobody says, hey, Fred's Guitars, we do the best work in town. Come see us. Voted best hamburger, you know, whatever. It doesn't exist. I had to start calling people. And because I was new here, I didn't know that many people. It took a while to find a Joe Glazer or somebody who does good guitar work. Whereas if we provide a place for those guys who have those services to say, hey, here we are. If you're traveling or if you're living in Nashville or whatever, we're here. And that could be the same case as some guy in some small town in France, you know?
Right.
How are you going to know? And this will give you the opportunity to be able
what's
to
even cooler is that small guy in France can now access and see what it's like to be in the LA music scene, how it really works, what the ins and outs, how you really stay in the music business in Nashville. You know, what New York City looks like, where he might want to move to, or, you know, actually watch a luthier from Tennessee actually do a setup on a guitar and why he chooses what strings, you know, or Tom Bukovac telling you why he chooses a certain this or that, or why he tunes his guitar. You know, I watched a video of Tom's recently where he said, I never really tune, you know, I kind of get it in tune, but then I tune by fourths and fifths the whole time. You know, and I was like, oh, okay. I started doing that, and it's like so much better. My guitar is more in tune. You ever tune your guitar and then it's like instantly out of tune when you hit a D? It's like, what the freak, you know? But it's like, that's how do you get that information off the internet? The internet is great, but it's so disorganized, and it doesn't have sort of this person curating it, you know? So
yeah. I mean, you look at what Tom's been doing recently with that whole homeschooling thing, right? He didn't do that with any intention. He just did it because it was something to do, and it's gone through the roof now, right?
Yeah.
There's thousands of guitar players that could go out and start doing something like that. He doesn't produce them. It's real. And I think that's appealing to people, is to be in the living rooms of these guys, to understand what the realities are and not a performance. But if you want to do a performance, you can. There
was a video of Tom years ago that I had seen where he had just gotten his Sean Fullerton Strat, the white one. And he sat down and Sean just pulled out did this YouTube video that was like very haphazard. And he plays.
That's the Jeff Sen video.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Original
I'm sorry.
Sen. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. And so he's playing, and then he plays the song that's like, it's just incredible, right? It's like right out of a movie soundtrack. And then people would learn it and they would post it. And then the people were saying, oh, you know, he wrote that and it's this piece, he slaved over it and spent a bunch of time doing it. And other people say, no, it was stream of consciousness. And I asked Book and he said, no, I just picked it up and played it. And people are saying bullshit. And then they watch his homeschooling, and every day he just turns on his camera and he plays another thing that sounds like he spent his whole life arranging. Yeah. And it's just this thing that is, I told my son when I were watching one, and I said, he's doing that right now. Total stream of consciousness. This is from his brain to his fingers. Like, he doesn't know what's happening 8 bars from now. And my son was just like, my son couldn't comprehend it. But I think he's proved through these videos that hands down that he's at a different level of just execution. His instrument
Yeah,
is not
absolutely.
separated from his brain. His fingers are merely, brain connections.
It's an extension, yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. But that's the kind of thing that you don't even know that those people exist. Sure, you may have heard their guitar part a billion times, but you don't even know they exist as a guitar player learning to play guitar or coming up. You get direct access on a platform like yours, not only to watch them and to see that, but then to reach out to them and take part of a program they may be doing. And they actually get paid for it, God forbid. Right?
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing, right? Musicians are so used to doing stuff and not getting paid for it just because they're hoping it'll lead to something else. And I think people take advantage of that. But imagine if the Tom Buchabacks of the world just said, screw this, I'm not going to become a guitar player because there's no way to make a living.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening to the music industry in a large part, is that guys are just saying, the next Eddie Van Halen or the next Eric Clapton or whatever it might be, might not be.
What if Eddie Van Halen had my original guitar teacher who took all of the joy and love out of playing guitar? Right?
I think I had the same teacher.
I quit playing guitar like at age 12 and didn't pick it up till I was in my mid-20s again, and then found the real joy of it. It's like finding a good teacher will make the difference in regular education and in music education. It will make all the difference. And, there's so many people out there they are the CPAs of guitar instruction that just beat you up with a chord book and don't connect any of the theory as to why they're doing it. Once you learn the Nashville number system and you learn one key, all you have to do is add keys to it and all the knowledge you have for the one key. It's like that for me is like one of these moments versus learn every C major, C minor, C sus, C major 7. And then you're like, what relevance does it have to anything? It's like if you have a good friend in the music business and they say, use this guy, he's going to change the way you see guitar. Well, shit, that's hard information to get to. And you probably won't get to it unless you have that. And this forum seems like it's going to be a curated forum of the right people that are able to say, hey, I've been doing this 30 years. The byproduct of me tying my shoes for 50 years is that I know how to tie the living shit out of my shoes. No one's going to tell me that I'm not tying my shoes right. And it's like the consequence of being a great guitar player for 30 years, achieving great tones, being on great records, and then having access to those people. You can't get that in the little town of Ambridge where I grew up, but you can get it on this platform.
Yeah. And, I think that's what Tom provided for people is, obviously he's a bigger name amongst guitar players, but outside of Nashville, I wouldn't say that's the case. But they're guitar players. They know how to find these people, but there was never a whole lot about Tom other than the garage videos that he would do, just him playing. There wasn't a whole lot out there. And by him just creating a totally non-produced channel of reality of him just doing exactly the things you're talking about, that's so appealing to people. And it's just great to have access to that stuff. And I imagine there's 1,000 other guitar players out there that could be just as interesting.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. When do you think it might be something that people would actually see on their computer screens?
I think that we can be done with beta testing within 30 days.
Wow.
It's pretty close. There are things that we want to add now, but it's just probably going to wait.
And you're calling it the Joe West World of Music, right?
Yes.
The name of the platform. No, what is the name of the platform?
Deal.
Do you have a name?
We don't. Not yet. We have names. But funny enough, that's the one thing that has troubled us the most. Is coming up with a good
every
name.
rock band in high school.
Yeah, but it's like, you can call yourself, I look around the massage chairs. And if you put out good music, then people are going to be like, that's a cool name.
Right. I can't imagine that Van Halen was like, when someone said, hey, let's call the band Van Halen. Now it's incredibly cool after 3 decades of incredible music. But I wonder when it was first spoken into the back of the van, if they were like, yeah, man, that's it. Sounds super cool. Or we're like, that's insane.
Yeah, I'm sure. But that's just it, right? You kind of have to pick it and stick with it. Yeah. I don't know. Can you remember your high school band names?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do.
They were the worst.
Yeah, Fortress was one of mine.
Fortress. Nice.
The ultimate in Christian rock.
Ooh. See, we were all 80s. We were all influenced. I graduated in 85, so.
What's your worst band name?
Oh, let's see. White Fury.
That's incredible.
You know where we got that name? You remember that show Heart to Heart?
Yeah.
You remember that show?
Yeah.
There was a scene where there was a delivery van and the company was called White Fury Delivery.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well,
That's the coolest thing.
White Fury might be the worst internet name in our current culture.
In the current culture.
For any platform.
But I think it was a play on they delivered animal furs, so that even takes it up another notch.
Amazing.
Heart to Heart.
But there, you know, our competitor, so to speak, was Black Dragon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We had Illusion. That was one of our names. Knox, Knox. Some good ones.
Mike,
They were cool then.
What's your worst band name?
Well, the worst band name was probably my actual band that I had for like 10 years. Johnny Vegas. It's terrible. It was one of these deals that we had a gig and we needed a band name, and this was a friend's nickname, and it freaking stuck for like 10 years. Yeah. Awful name. Awful.
That's I mean, go down the list of names of famous bands right now, and if you really analyze them, you're like, oh, that's kind of crap. The Plain White Tees.
Yeah.
You know, but it all comes down to how people associate your music with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Great, very interesting conversation. You're easy to talk to.
Thank you.
What do you charge by the hour? I'd like to come over there and lay on the couch in your studio, and you can talk to me about my childhood and my relationship with my father.
You just have to wire it up. I'll talk to you about anything.
I will do that for you, my friend.
Awesome.
Oh, the other thing that Chris isn't telling you, and we haven't mentioned, is that Chris has maybe one of the coolest home stereo hi-fi rigs I've ever seen. I had a pressing that I had to, an LP pressing that I had to do for the Joey and Rory record, and they sent me the pressing to approve it. And I didn't have any means to listen to it. So I went over to Chris's place and listened on this $40,000, probably just for the turntable system, Macintosh amplifiers. Pretty incredible.
The most fun thing you can do is go to Chris's place and tell him it sounds a little out of phase.
I fixed it for you, Chris. I put an EQ in. It's from my car. It's
a little out of phase. Oh, it sounds good. It's a little out of phase. All right, man, take it easy. Just messing with him.
Oh, yeah. Well, he did say that, so.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
I can't help
very
myself.
phased to me.
I can't help myself. Well, you know, when I was the chief engineer of a recording studio in Pittsburgh, I was working on a record for a band called Rusted Root, which is a very cool band. They were a big national band. I worked on one or two songs on that record, but when they were mixing that record, my buddy was mixing it, and I walked into the control room, and by the way, the mixes came out incredible. They were great mixes. That's how good this guy was. But when I walked in the control room, I was like, what is going on? And it turned out that they had the monitors 180 degrees out of phase. Like the worst listening situation. It literally, when you sat between the speakers, you wanted to throw up. It was that twisted inside out. They mixed a large portion, if not all, that record with the monitors 180 degrees out of phase.
Wow.
And they were in phase on the back. I had to go back to the amplifier to find that they were the wrong direction back on the amp. And for some reason, my buddy, when he mixed that record, it was like he did it with it 180 degrees out of phase, and it was one of the best sounding records I've ever heard. So who knows what we're doing?
Maybe that's his secret weapon.
Yeah, right. I just don't know how he stayed conscious that long, listening for 10 hours a day out of phase. It literally felt like somebody was taking your insides and taking you up like into one of those Red Bull planes where they do this the entire time. It was disconcerting to be in the control room.
We used to have a pedal, it's called the Revolver, that Mark Sampson designed for us, and it was a recreation of a Magnatone vibe, and it was in true stereo. In true stereo, you have to put one side out of phase, right? And like if you have, you know, two outputs on a pedal, most of them claim it's stereo when it's just dual mono outputs. You know what I mean? True stereo is a little bit different. And this pedal, if you listen to it in a stereo setup, it would make you sick because it was a vibe, like a swirly vibe, and it would just mess with your ears. It's a really cool sounding pedal, but it literally would make you sick.
So it was wired out of phase, but was there some sort of middle side thing going on where it was decoded eventually, or was it just truly 180 degrees out of phase?
Yeah, 180 degrees out of phase, and the way they interacted with each other created a stereo thing. So you could sit
Wow.
between two amps and you would hear things just kind of going back and forth like that. It was the craziest thing. I have one here if you want to try it.
No, thanks.
Pretty fun. You don't want to throw up?
It just seems weird to me. Yeah, I don't even understand it as you explain it, but I'm sure you're right. You are the technician. I'm merely the guy that listens. Well, thank you so much, buddy, for being on.
Yeah, of course.
Great time hanging with you.
Do we have the website and stuff where we can?
Yeah, what websites can we find?
As far as just Rockett?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Anything you want to plug to our tens of listeners?
RocketPedals.com. Rocket with 2 T's. You know, the funny thing is we're getting ready to do a bunch of our product videos. That's why we built this studio, and we're going to do a bunch of creative things out of here. But one of the first things we're going to talk about is that J Rockett is actually a human being. A lot of people think we just came up with the name Rocket. That's Jay's real last name.
Oh, wow.
They're like, oh, you're really clever. 2 T's on that Rocket, right? But it is. And that's why we used it. My last name would not have done very well.
All right, well, we'll list that in the description. Anything else you want to plug?
You know, I'd like to plug this new deal, but it's just a little premature. I kind of don't want to give away secrets just yet.
Awesome. Well, look forward to seeing that. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
and from the West Barn, we are signing off.